I'm Jane Applegath. This is the Epic Vision Zone where bold ideas meet extraordinary leaders. What if midlife wasn't a breakdown, but a breakthrough? And what if perimenopause wasn't something to fix, but a recalibration guiding you into your next level of leadership, energy, and influence? Today, we're welcoming back the incredible Dr. Verena, PhD, MSc, neuro-trained kinesiologist, and integrative health expert, who is redefining what it means for women to thrive in midlife. Blending Western nutrition with Eastern medicine, Dr. Verena's work connects women to their true vitality, mind, body, and spirit. With over 2 decades of research and clinical practice, she facilitates guided retreats and speaking engagements. She is also the author of Dr. Verena's Kitchen, Eating for Ultimate Health Made Easy, a powerful guide to healing through food and daily practice. Her mission is to elevate global health, one woman, one plate, one breakthrough at a time. Today, we dive into the bold truth every woman needs to hear. Midlife isn't the moment you fade, it's the moment you become the woman you were always meant to be. Welcome, Dr. Verena. Thank you for joining us here today and speaking about this incredible topic.
You're so welcome, Jane. Always a pleasure to be on.
Well, we were just chatting beforehand and we were saying how timely this topic is, and we'll just dive right into it. So, why do you say that it's a myth that perimenopause is only about hormones?
Very good question. So it's a myth because perimenopause is not simply a state of hormone deficiency. It's a dynamic and neuroendocrine transition involving multiple interconnected systems with the brain at the center. So the process is initiated by changes in the hypothalamic signaling, which alters communication across the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis, so the HPO, and that includes that stress response system of ours, leading to irregular and often unpredictable patterns of estrogen and progesterone rather than simply a linear decline. So perimenopause is really a transition that can take 10 to 15 years for women. It can start at 35 towards 55, so it's not like this menopause that is just the first year where women stop having their cycle, and then post that year of stopping their cycles, it's actually post-menopausal. So we go from perimenopausal 10-15 years to during menopause, that 1 year transition, and then that postmenopausal era. So the perimenopausal era is really the most challenging time for most women because these hormonal fluctuations have widespread downstream effects. So let's talk about quickly the different drivers that women really our audience understands it really quick. Easily. So estrogen, women have heard of, is really a driver. It's a neuroactive steroid that modulates serotonin, dopamine, and brain glucose metabolism. So its variability directly impacts mood, cognition, and energy. Then we have progesterone through its metabolites, enhances the GABAergic activity, and its early decline reduces the inhibitory tone in the brain. So it increases that neural excitability, the anxiety, and sleep disruption. And in parallel, what is not as often talked about is that there are important shifts in other hormones that are often overlooked, like testosterone gradually declines, a hormone that's not just important in men, also in women, because it influences dopamine minergic pathways, so involved in motivation, reward, cognitive drive, and muscle maintenance. And then melatonin production also decreases and becomes dysregulated, disrupting our circadian rhythms, impairing sleep architecture, and reducing mitochondrial efficiency and antioxidants capacity. So these challenges further amplify that fatigue, cognitive symptoms, and recovery challenges. At the same time, that HPA axis becomes more reactive. So that's that stress response axis that increases then cortisol output and prolongs that stress response. And this contributes also to impaired insulin sensitivity, so alters that fat distribution, disrupts sleep, reduces that resilience we had. And then we often also come across mitochondrial functions and metabolic flexibility that are affected. So linking hormonal changes to energy production and the whole body metabolism. So while ovarian hormones are central, they are embedded within a broader network of neuroendocrine, metabolic, and circadian regulation. So the symptoms women experience, such as, there are, I could say, over 30 at least registered as kind of perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal symptoms. So anxiety, brain fog, fatigue, sleep disruption, and weight gain are like amongst the high ones, very common ones, and the result of this integrated system shift, not just hormone imbalances. So the reframe we have to talk about really is that perimenopause is not just a hormone problem. It's a systemic level recalibration of the brain, the endocrine and metabolic networks that regulate the entire body. So this is why effective support must go beyond hormone replacement or supplementation alone, and also needs to address the nervous system regulation, the circadian rhythm, alignment, metabolic health, and recovery capacity to truly optimize adaptation and outcomes.
Oh my Lord, I'm exhausted already. Oh my gosh. A recalibration of almost the entire body. I have to say,
Yeah.
you coming here and telling us all of those different things that are happening within our bodies, I just think, wow, we are incredible to be able to
Yeah.
recalibrate all of this, the body, the mind. Like you said, it's not just a hormonal issue, it's a recalibration of the brain, like all of these symptoms, and a system, as you called it. You said a system at one point, and it's almost as if everything has to rewire itself to reconnect, to find the balance back in our bodies. And it's amazing. But wow, that's a lot that's
Yeah.
happening.
It's huge for
Well,
women.
yeah, it absolutely is. So now I'm thinking we are more powerful than we know, because we come out of it the other end and we're still here. So kudos to
Yes.
us.
Yes.
Well, thank you for all of that incredible information. So, what is the biggest lie then that women have been told about perimenopause, and how is that belief quietly keeping them disconnected from their power?
I would say the biggest lie women have been told about perimenopause is that it's a decline, a slow breakdown of their body, hormones, identity, quite disempowering. And that belief hasn't come from nowhere. It has been reinforced by a system around them, so culturally, socially, and even medically, that has normalized pushing through, overperforming, putting others first, and disconnecting from their body signals. At the same time, women's need in this phase are often not adequately recognized or supported, and their symptoms are frequently actually dismissed, diluted, or not taken seriously by or others and healthcare professionals, very often, leaving many feeling unseen, unheard, and unsupported. So, for decades, women have been encouraged and often rewarded for overriding their needs. But in midlife, that approach stops working. So, the body no longer tolerates chronic stress, self neglect, or misalignment in the same way. So perimenopause is not simply loss, it is really that recalibration of the systems that we mentioned before, like the brain, the nervous system, and metabolism, preparing a woman for a different phase of life that requires a new way of operating. So it doesn't really take the power away, it reveals where you have been giving it away and invites you to reclaim it.
I love that. Reclaim it and where you have been giving it away. That is pure gold. Yes, absolutely. Well, speaking of the brain, you just mentioned it there. We've heard of brain fog, of memory glitches, and much more. So, how do hormonal shifts affect cognition, mood, and motivation, and emotional regulation?
So, hormonal shifts in perimenopause have a direct impact on the brain because key hormones, particularly estrogen and progesterone, act as a neuroactive regulator, not just reproductive hormones. So, I'll break it down quickly. Estrogen plays a central role in supporting brain function and energy metabolism. So it enhances that serotonin, which stabilizes mood, and dopamine, which drives motivation and reward. And it helps the brain efficiently use glucose as fuel, especially in areas responsible for memory, focus, and decision making, such as that hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. So when estrogen becomes very erratic in those 10 to 15 years leading up to menopause, these symptoms become less stable, which can lead to brain fog, forgetfulness, reduced concentration, and mood fluctuation. So at the same time, progesterone declines, which reduces this calming effect on the brain via GABA, the primary neurotransmitter responsible for relaxation, sleep, and emotional steadiness. So this can make the nervous system more excitable, contributing to that anxiety, irritability, and a lower tolerance to stress. And testosterone also gradually declines. So while often overlooked, it plays a really important role in our drive, in our self-confidence, cognitive sharpness. So lower levels can show up as reduced motivation, indecisiveness, and a loss of that internal spark. And as I mentioned before, melatonin becomes also disrupted. So that affects our circadian rhythm and sleep quality. So it's that vicious cycle then, because poor sleep can further impact cognition, emotional regulation, and resilience, creating a feedback loop where brain function and mood are harder to stabilize. So when women experience brain fog, emotional ups and downs, or a loss of motivation, it's not random or psychological. It's really the result of a coordinated shift in brain chemistry, energy production, and that nervous system regulation.
Wow,
So
that
we're really not,
is so.
we yeah,
Go ahead.
we're not losing our minds. I wanted to say it's really our brain adapting to a new hormonal environment.
Yes, that is so important to realize. When you have the science which you are providing here and the information, then you start to realize, oh, it's not me, because that happens a lot with women. I mean, it's, and like you said, it's not just the brain fog, then it's the lack of motivation, and then you think, oh, I'm just getting old, and that's the resilience, and then there's, maybe there's the anxiety, and you're just like, okay, well, this is what happens in old age, because no one has told us otherwise. But yes, this information is so vital. Well, thank you for that. Well, you just spoke about it just a moment ago, that you don't feel like yourself. So why do we say that, and why is it not pathology?
So, feeling not like yourself in perimenopause or feeling there's something wrong with me is one of the most common and most misunderstood experiences for women, and it's deeply rooted in that brain biology, not a personal failure. So, as that hormonal signaling shifts, particularly with fluctuating estrogen and declining progesterone, the brain undergoes a process that we call neuroplastic change. So, estrogen supports key brain networks involved in that memory, emotional regulation, and identity processing, while progesterone helps stabilize mood through its calming effect on the nervous system. So when these inputs become less consistent, the brain usually the brain's usual patterns of thinking, feeling, and responding begin to change. So at the same time, there is a recalibration between the limbic system, which is your emotional brain, and the
Mm.
prefrontal cortex, which is our rational decision-making center. So this can make emotions feel stronger, reactions less predictable,
Mm.
and your internal world can become quite unfamiliar. So you may think differently, feel differently, and respond differently. And that can create a sense of, who am I? But this is really not pathology, as you mentioned, Jane. It is not our brain breaking down. It is our brain recognizing and updating itself. So this phase is often described as a form of neural pruning and refinement, where
Mm.
the brain becomes less tolerant of what no longer is relevant, whether that is stress, roles, expectations, or ways of being that no longer align with us. So the feeling of unfamiliarity is not a loss of self. It is actually the transition between who you have been and who you're becoming, I would say.
Mm. I love what you said there. You said neural refining. It's almost like an upgrade. And it's
That's
so
right.
yeah, and it's interesting because we see it as the opposite, or we've been taught that it's the opposite. Because, they say that when you go through perimenopause and then you go through menopause, well, you're just, everything's falling apart. But I love the perception here and the truth that it is an upgrade to refining things that have been going on. So, what an amazing shift to talk about it this way. Well, the nervous system in midlife, you've talked now about this and why life feels disrupted. But and there's stress, we get sensitivity, and you've mentioned all of that, overwhelm. So why do our strategies stop working in midlife? Say we've been doing things and then all those strategies that we approach some of these symptoms with, they don't work in midlife.
I think that's the case because midlife can feel unexpectedly disruptive because the nervous system itself is changing. So hormonal shifts,
Mm.
particularly that fluctuating estrogen and declining progesterone, reduce the body's natural ability to buffer stress. So, estrogen normally supports that stress resilience and recovery, while progesterone enhances that calming through the GABA. So, as these decline or become inconsistent, the nervous system becomes more sensitive and more reactive,
Mm.
meaning it takes less to trigger actually stress and longer to return to that calm. So at the same time, the HPA axis, which I mentioned before, it's our hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, that stress response system becomes more active. So it leads
Mm.
to higher and more prolonged cortisol responses. So this then affects sleep,
Oh.
energy, mood, and also cognitive functions. So sleep often becomes lighter and more fragmented due to both hormonal and nervous system changes. And poor sleep then further amplifies the stress sensitivity, creating that feedback loop we talked about before of fatigue, overwhelm, and reduced resilience. So, this is why life can suddenly feel too much, even if nothing externally changed. And this is also why old strategies stop working. So,
Mm.
the what once worked, such as push pushing harder, doing more, relying on willpower, high intensity exercise, caffeine, or skipping meals, rushing, was supported by a more buffered system. But in midlife, those same strategies can now add to the stress load. So they increase the cortisol, disrupting our blood sugar, impairing recovery, and worsening symptoms. So the body is no longer designed to operate through override. It is now requiring regulation, recovery, and alignment.
Oh my gosh. That is so vital to know. Yes, because you
Mm,
could bounce back before, but now it's, and that is more healthy, and it's more adaptable for your body to have the rest, to have the recalibration as we get older. But it's not just because we're aging, it's because our bodies are demanding it. Oh my gosh, that is
that's
such a light bulb.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so important, but
Which,
it's so hard for us women because we've done things, in one way, and it's like that old programming, that innate way of how we're doing things, has to change. But it's easier said than done, because when we get riddled by symptoms, we think life suddenly became harder, but it's really our nervous system that is asking for a more sustainable way of living, and we have to be very kind to ourselves, to step into that space. And knowing it is so empowering for women, though, because we shift from what's wrong to, okay, what does my body need?
yes, absolutely. It's a signal. And so instead of you saying, like you said, the negative, which is what's wrong, you pause and you say, okay, what does my body need? Because there is nothing wrong. We just need to understand what it needs in this moment. And that is so empowering, because that's a positive, and that's something that's going to
Mm,
help sustain you throughout all of this, as opposed to, like you said, what's wrong. And that is so
yeah.
important for women to understand. So important. Well, thank you for that. And here's something that I know a lot of women struggle with through perimenopause
Mhm.
and menopause: beyond calories and weight, what changes metabolically, and why do force based approaches backfire? And you might have answered that question a little bit with what you just told us.
Well, we can dive deeper into it. So in midlife, metabolism is no longer governed primarily by calories. It is driven by hormonal signaling, muscle mass, and that cellular energy production. So, as estrogen fluctuates and declines, the body becomes less insulin sensitive, meaning it handles glucose less efficiently and is more likely to store energy as fat, particularly around the abdomen. And that's what a lot of women really struggle with. And this is why, in that, we could say 40 plus, this is why GLP-1, kind of, and peptides become so successful now, because it's so hard for women to shift weight, in that 40 plus, kind of time. So, what also happens is that there is a decline in muscle protein synthesis, making it harder to maintain lean muscle, which is critical because muscle acts as a key metabolic organ, regulating blood sugar, inflammation, and energy expenditure. And there's also a shift in mitochondrial function, so meaning the body's ability to produce energy becomes actually less efficient, unfortunately. So often contributing to that fatigue and reduced endurance. And cortisol reactivity increases, and when elevated chronically, further impairs that insulin sensitivity, disrupts that thyroid signaling, and promotes fat storage while reducing recovery. So it's that perfect storm of, lots of women noticing that lower energy, slower recovery, increased fat storage despite unchanged habits. So, force based approaches such as undereating, excessive cardio, high intensity training, or pushing through fatigue can now actually backfire, because they increase that physiological stress. This drives cortisol higher, worsens blood sugar instability, suppresses that muscle repair, and shifts the body into a catabolic state where it breaks rather than builds. And instead of really instead of improving metabolism, these strategies can actually make it less efficient. So in this phase, the body responds actually far better to a supportive approach. So number one is resistance training, heavy lifting to preserve and build muscle. There is no fear of bulking up. Women are actually going to lean out. What is really also important to support this, like really change of the muscle quality. So we want to, break down the muscle and therefore the fat in the muscle and rebuild that lean muscle. That needs to be supported through adequate protein intake, 30 grams with each meal, which is not that easy to achieve, but all doable. Then stable, balanced meals to regulate that blood sugar. So the 30 grams of protein, fiber with every meal, healthy fats is super important, and of course prioritizing recovery and sleep to restore those energy systems. So it's not really our metabolism that's failing; it's adapting to a new hormonal environment as well that requires a different way of how we support it.
That's so important to understand. Yes, I love that. The resistance training versus possibly the cardio, or if you're a cyclist or a runner, which is much more cardio intense. But all of those, and like you said, it's an entire lifestyle because it also includes the protein and all of the other, fiber and whatnot that support the body in this changing environment, basically.
Yeah,
So yes, yeah, thank you for those tips. Well, and we spoke a little bit about reframing the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, and in reframing them, it helps us understand, as you said before, what is happening as opposed to jumping to what is wrong. So, for those listening, what the body is asking for, are there any other tips that you could give us that in reframing that, it's a signal to say, this is what I need? Can you give us a few more tips of what the body might be asking for during this time?
sure. So one of the most powerful shifts a woman can make in midlife is to stop seeing symptoms as a problem to fix, as we said, and start seeing them as that intelligent biological feedback. So, anxiety, fatigue, irritability, and brain fog are not random. They reflect a real time change in our brain nervous system and metabolism and hormonal environment. So, anxiety often signals a more sensitive nervous system with that reducing calming input. Fatigue can reflect that increased energy demand or reduced recovery. Brain fog points to changes in the brain energy and cognitive loading, and irritability often highlights a mismatch between our capacity and what is being asked of us. So, the first recommendation is that rather than overriding these signals, the key is to get curious. So, asking questions like, what is my body asking of me right now? Is it more rest, more nourishment, more boundaries, less stimulation? When you begin to listen in this way, symptoms become guidance rather than something to fear. So the invitation is get curious and start listening. What is also important is the support required is not fixed. It really evolves. So, what your body needs will vary from woman to woman and even with the same woman over time. So, support may include lifestyle changes such as sleep, upgrading our nutrition and stress regulation, Reducing caffeine, or personally, for example, I have cut out caffeine, and that has made the biggest change for my perimenopausal symptoms. Targeted nutrients like magnesium glycinate can be a game changer for women 30 minutes before bed, because it can really help that nervous system to regulate better and support that calm that we need to sleep, improve that deeper restful sleep. Vitamin D is very important. I highly recommend women to get their vitamin D levels checked, because I find that 90% of my perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal clients are actually quite vitamin D deficient, which is not just important for bone health and immunity, but for that calm, healthy, strong gut lining. It really supports you very well through that time. Fish oils, iron, B vitamins can be very helpful for some women. Herbal support. Always get your thyroid checked, because very often thyroid can get really kind of imbalanced during menopause as well. Perimenopause, or medical approaches such as bioidentical hormone therapy can, like bioidentical progesterone, estrogen for some women, testosterone, can be extremely life changing. So it really is not set. It can vary what a woman needs. There's also not a decision about, okay, I have to take bioidentical hormones now and for the rest of my life. Some women take it for 1 year to just manage those really very disruptive symptoms, where it's very hard for them to cope, to do the day to day, and then they cycle out of it, they feel much better, and then they may just switch to a herbal nutrient supportive way, while always changing and supporting yourself with lifestyle, so nutrition, exercise, and sleep, and stress regulation. So the key is not one perfect solution, but an adaptive, responsive approach that meets really the needs where your body is at the time.
Right. Yes. It's the whole thing. Like you said, it's not just one solution. And it never would be, and it's
Yeah.
all individual depending on the person, where they are in their life, and what their lifestyle is, and where they're coming from. It's
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, a whole, like you said, it's the whole body, mind, and spirit, as you've said we said at the beginning. You talk about your core message being your body isn't failing you, it's recalibrating you for the next level of power. I love that statement. So tell us why women who listen to and work with their biology instead of fighting it emerge clearer, calmer, and more sovereign.
Yeah, I can see how you love that question. Me too. So when a woman, we could say, shifts from believing her body is failing her to understanding that it is recalibrating her, everything changes. So biologically, emotionally, and psychologically. So fighting the body through pushing, overriding symptoms, or trying to control outcomes keeps the nervous system in that state of stress where cortisol remains elevated, recovery is impaired, and symptoms persist and even worsen sometimes. In contrast, when a woman begins to listen to and work with her biology, she moves her symptoms into a state of safety, that parasympathetic rest and digest state, and she moves towards regulation, where the brain, hormones, and metabolism can adapt more efficiently. So the shift allows for greater clarity, because the brain is no longer operating under chronic stress and energy depletion. It creates a deeper sense of calm as the nervous system regains its ability to regulate and return to baseline. And it fosters a sense of sovereignty, because she no longer is reacting to her body or the external pressures, but making decisions based on internal alignment and awareness. So, importantly, the process also involves recognizing and changing long standing patterns, such as overgiving, people pleasing, or constantly pushing beyond capacity that the body can no longer sustain. So as these patterns are released, women often experience a profound realignment in how they live, work, and relate to themselves and others. So women who move through that transition in alignment don't just feel better, they become actually more intentional, resilient, and self-led.
Yes, absolutely. I can associate that with some individuals that I know. And it is a transition. It's whether or not you take that transition or understand that it's happening. And this is why this is so powerful. Because if you understand that it's not just you, that it is a powerful transition that you are meant to experience and you're meant to go through. Once you understand that, then you move forward with possible solutions as opposed to fighting it, which, like you said, backfires because it aggravates all of the symptoms even more, which make you feel even worse. And then you go to your regular
That's right.
doctor, and all they do is give you medication that mask the symptoms. And it just
Yeah.
goes around a vicious circle. Oh my gosh, that is
Mhm.
so important for women to know. Yes, I'm going to share this now with some women that I know that are
Yeah,
experiencing
yeah.
these things for sure. Yes. Well, now I'm just curious for you, Dr. Verena. You know, you say you cut out caffeine, and so did you realize yourself that you were going through these symptoms, or were these some of the things that triggered you to look, like you said, curiosity? Now I'm just curious how your journey has taken you.
Well, I'm turning 47 in October. I'm going to turn 47 in October. And for me, I was, due to my healthy lifestyle, like the resistance training, the good nutrition, the sleep architecture I always work on, the optimizing, of that work-life balance, it has had me kind of sailing through it quite well until I would say the start of 2026, where it hit me like, a thunderstorm. And that can very often happen for women, where they go, oh my God, it's just like it hit me overnight. And now I feel I have 5 out of the 30 symptoms where I can't like, and for me it was similar, where I was more anxious, I couldn't stress regulate as well. My sleep went off. I'm like, what is happening? I've nothing changed in my life. And I just tried to optimize and listen, and it wasn't getting better. And I thought, okay, here we are. I think this is not the start, but getting deeper into that perimenopause, where I thought, okay, what do I have? You always need to reevaluate first, like, what are the biggest stressors in your life, right? So for me, it was definitely taking more pauses, hitting that pause button, actually more. And 2026, I decided for me will be about doing less, just maintaining what I'm doing well. So I took that invitation of my body, inviting me to rest, recalibrate more, do a little bit less, look after myself, uh, instead of just hitting all those, expected outcome kind of driven goals that we can set ourselves. And then I said, I'm gonna reduce my caffeine intake. So I wasn't ever a coffee drinker to begin with, but I had, black tea. In form of a chai tea. I had maybe a matcha here and there, although matcha is more beneficial because it actually is more less aggravating, because it has also L-theanine in it, which is calming, has a calming effect. But still, for me, I'm a sensitive, creature. It still is very kind of stimulating having 1 or 2 cups of caffeinated tea a day. So since I cut that out and just drink uncaffeinated tea like dandelion or any herbal, I feel I can tolerate and regulate stress so much better.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Yes, because it, like you said, it just
Yeah.
hit you, and things are changing and shifting, and you've got the tools. Well, this is a perfect segue into our question here. So, for women listening right now who feel exhausted and foggy and overwhelmed, what is one powerful shift that they can make today to start reclaiming their energy?
So I would say the invitation is to move from guessing to understanding and from pushing to supporting. So I would
Mm.
invite women to get a comprehensive baseline check of your health. That's what I did too. And we want to do that at least once a year. So get all the key blood markers checked and not just, a generic baseline one. We want to get a really comprehensive blood test, check all your liver function, your kidney function, your iron, your thyroid, your vitamin D. You got to ask for that. B vitamins, glucose, and insulin should be checked, as well as your estrogen levels. Period to get a very insightful, like predictable reading. So often, because often that fatigue, that brain fog, and overwhelm is not just part of perimenopause, but they really it amplifies every underlying imbalances that we can, and that's why we want to address it, because it could be a thyroid imbalance, it could be a B12 and iron deficiency, it could be a vitamin D deficiency. It doesn't always need to be just the perimenopausal symptoms. So we just want to make sure. And then when you have that clear insight, then of course we also at the same time want to make those powerful lifestyle adjustments. Like I said, aim for the 30 grams of protein with each meal, and that's not just the 1 or 2 eggs for breakfast, that's just 12 grams. So you need far more. You may need 4 eggs, or you may need 3 eggs with a bit of cottage cheese, wild caught salmon, or just some beans. So it's really important to support that blood sugar from the start of the day, your brain function and your muscle, and then targeted 30 grams of fiber a day to support that gut health, metabolism, and hormone clearance. And we want to include our probiotics, the fermented foods, to support that gut brain axis. What is also really important is that morning sunlight to regulate the circadian rhythm and energy, and the coffee or any caffeine not upon rising on an empty stomach, because in perimenopause that's really not going to work anymore. So we want to have our caffeine post meal, ideally 90 minutes after waking. And we want to also consider that magnesium glycinate in the evening, as I mentioned, to support relaxation, sleep, and nervous system. So focus is really on stabilizing your routine. So we want to prioritize sleep, recovery, and reduce that overstimulation from that excess caffeine, overtraining, and that constant busyness. But equally important, I also want to mention, is that internal shift that's not talked a lot about, is that this phase asks you to create stronger boundaries, which I would say all of us women have to learn to get better at that. Is so saying no without guilt, to recognize where you've been operating from. What are your patterns, like overgiving, people pleasing, or constantly putting others first? It's about moving away from I should or I have to, and towards, do I feel like doing it? Do I choose to? Is this supportive for me? So the most powerful shift is not doing more. It's really changing how you relate to your body and your energy.
Yes, connect with your body and your energy. And that speaks volumes. Thank you. That was wonderful. Well, here's one other question then. If food is medicine, which I know it is, what's one food that every woman could add to their plate starting today that will help them through this?
I would say eggs. is really
Mm.
one of the most nutrient-dense foods available. It provides high-quality, complete protein, which is essential in midlife to support that muscle mass, stabilize blood sugar, and maintain energy. But beyond protein, eggs are also rich in choline, which is part of the B vitamin group, a key nutrient for brain function, memory, and that liver health we all need, as well as other B vitamins that support energy production and nervous system regulation. And in perimenopause, where our brain and metabolism and hormones are all shifting, foods like eggs provide the building blocks our body really needs to adapt. So they help reduce cravings, improve satiety, support cognitive clarity, and keep energy more stable throughout the day. So
Mm.
start your day with a protein-rich meal like 4 scrambled eggs, and it really can change how your brain and body function for the rest of the day.
Wow. Thank you. That is such good advice and an easy thing for most people to incorporate into their lifestyle. Absolutely. Well, if you could delete one belief from every woman's mind about aging, what would it be?
Um, I would say that inve- decline is inevitable, and that feeling worse is not just something you have to accept, because disbelief quietly lowers expectations and stops women from asking deeper questions and keeps them disconnected from what their body is actually capable of. So the truth is, while biology does change how you experience those changes is not fixed. So, energy, clarity, strength, mood, and resilience are all highly responsive to how you support your brain, nervous system, metabolism, and overall lifestyle. So, when women believe decline is inevitable, they often normalize fatigue, brain fog, push through
Mm.
symptoms instead of understanding them, or assume nothing can be done. But when that belief is removed, something powerful happens, which is that they become curious instead of resigned, start listening instead of overriding, and they realize that their body is not working against them, but adapting and asking for support. So, aging is not a slow loss of power, it's an opportunity to redefine how we access it.
Mm. I love that. How we redefine how we access it. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for all of this incredibly vital information, Dr. Verena. Now, tell our audience where they can best connect with you and let them know that you also, because most people don't realize, but Dr. Verena is dialing in here from Australia, but she does has clients all over the world. So just let our audience know where they can connect best with you.
So, if people want to get in touch with me, they can always connect via my website. So, it's just drverena.com. It's just written out doctorverena.com, or always via Instagram. It's a great platform to get more information on all topics health, and can also get in touch with me. It's just Dr. Verena as well. Very straightforward. I look forward. Yeah, just reach out. Always happy to support people. And as you said, Jane, I work with people from all over the world. So holistic nutrition consultations, but particularly I work very much on the root cause approach of symptoms, emotional, mental, and physical, and kinesiology, neurotraining, recalibrating that gut-brain connection, the stress regulation axis, that autonomic nervous system that's deeply at the root of improving symptoms can also be done online.
Wonderful. Yes, I was chatting with Dr. Brenna before we got on here, and I was like, "Oh, yes, that's right. You do work with others elsewhere in the world," because I said, I was just joking. I said, well, for a doctor's appointment, it might take me 2 weeks because I'd have to get there and come back. But needless to say, now we know that she's available virtually, and why not? I mean, that's exactly, the world that we live in. So if there was one message that you could share with the world today, Dr. Verena, what would it be?
I would say that your body is always working for you, not against you,
Mm.
even if it feels like it is. So every symptom, every shift, every moment of fatigue or overwhelm is not a failure, it is a communication. So your body is constantly trying to guide you towards what it needs to restore balance, energy, and resilience. So we've been taught to override, to push, to disconnect, but true health comes from listening, responding, and supporting the body at a deeper level. So when you shift from that control to connection, everything changes. You stop fighting your body, you start understanding it, and you begin to work with it in a way that creates real lasting health. So my invitation is really to always remind yourself that your body is not a problem. It is the guide back to your power.
Mm. Yes, the guide back to your power, your body. Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Dr. Verena, for joining us here today and reminding us that a woman who trusts herself more, leads herself first, and lives in a body that's no longer asking for permission, but experiencing power. Because perimenopause isn't your breakdown, it's your becoming. Once again, for information to connect with Dr. Verena, go to the Epic Vision Zone bio pages where you will find all of her social media and direct contact information. And be sure to follow me on Instagram at Jane Applegath. Look me up at janeapplegath.com and like and subscribe to the Epic Vision Zone on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and much more. Sending you much love and gratitude. This is the Epic Vision Zone, the ultimate source for extraordinary transformations.